Michelle, I can't hear you. Is it just me, folks? Can anyone hear her?
No.
I think I'm about to have a visitor. So we improvise.
Well, there you go. Sometimes. Thank you. Sometimes you have to just move right along. Good morning, everyone. I'm glad to be with you this morning, and I'm asking you to join me in a moment of mindfulness. If any of you have read my blog for this week, I started the blog, and I wrote something called Timely Response. And the point of that was to let you all realize that there are some aspects of what's going on in our life right now that are hard. They're hard. Life is just not all bells and whistles and butterflies at the moment. It's just not. We are in recovery mode from a variety of reasons. And even within our community, not too many months ago, of course, we said goodbye to Kathy King. And this week, on Monday of this week, we lost another member of our community, Susan Laskowski. Some of you might remember her. She was very involved with Antonia and Kat Dawson on the greeters team. Lovely woman. And so, that's life. That's life. But we as metaphysicians, spiritual metaphysicians, I like to put those two together. We get to come to all situations with a mindfulness and an awareness and just a conscious intent to bring more to all situations. So I'm just going to ask you to go inside for a minute. Just go inside. And pay attention to the places inside of you right now where it's possible you have some concern or worry. You're watching the news, you're reading the paper, and you know better, but it gets your attention anyway. But go inside and take all that awareness of those things, those effects, and bundle them up in your imagination, make a ball out of them, and pat them down in your imagination, and pat it down until you have this ball of effects, and take that ball and throw it up into the presence of love, to the presence of God. Release it. Change your attention. Bring it here and not on the effects, not on form. Let us be that kind of community. And so with that feeling of letting go and changing our attention, please affirm with me, I am the peace I wish to see. I know this peace for my family. I know this peace for my community. My community knows this peace for the world. Take a breath.
love you, I love you, I love you, I'm sorry, I love you, please forgive me. I love you, I love you, I love you, I'm sorry, I love you, please forgive me. And I thank you, and I love you, I love you, I love you, I'm sorry, I love you, please forgive me. I love you, I love you, I love you, I'm sorry, I love you, please forgive me. I love you, I love you, I love you, I'm sorry, I love you, please forgive me. I thank you, and I love you, and I thank you, and I love you. I love you, I love you, I love you, I'm sorry, I love you, please forgive me. I'm grateful for you, I love you forever. Thank you.
And thank you, Jennifer and Michael. Before we go any further, Michelle, are you okay now?
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, good. All right.
Praise, you see the light here? This is God coming in and fixing everything right here over my shoulders. So,
Glad to be back.
which is a great way to introduce our Power Talk person for the day, our own, the Reverend Dawn Lee Martin. Thank you, Dawn Lee.
Well, good morning, spiritual family, and thank you, Neil. I feel honored to be invited to give a short power talk about forgiveness today. And I'll be sharing my favorite 3 simple questions that I like to ask myself if I feel I am in judgment. And I'm going to blend them with my personal life experience for you. So I like to think of these questions as spiritual first aid. So I've always got the wisdom and can use it in case I want to have an emergency. Okay, here's my personal experience using 3 questions. And that's it. I had an issue with people who use alcohol and drugs, which developed into a judgment about people who use alcohol and drugs. How did I know I had an issue? I asked myself the first and second most important questions of the day, which are, am I this? And was I this? They sort of go together. So sitting there in the moment of judgment, I searched my soul and asked, am I this? And was I this? I noticed that as I was judging their behavior, it was reminding me that in my own youth and in my own past, I also used alcohol and drugs. And by watching their behavior, I noticed I was feeling threatened by my very own shadow of guilt that I had been carrying for quite some time about my own past. And I felt also isolated and alone and disconnected. So even though I'm clean and I don't drink or do drugs, I did do it in the past and was able to feel the guilt. I was in the unforgiveness of my own self, trying to keep a tight lid on the shadow. But I was busted and all was revealed to be healed. And I discovered that the bottom line is this. If I'm holding on to unforgiveness toward myself or someone else, especially for a long time in the making, then the big news is I have then created the so-called shadow. Remember, unforgiveness equals the shadow. Once the shadow is discovered, felt, revealed, and forgiven and healed, it ceases to exist because it is just a thought, but one that imprisons the self. And the good news is that that button doesn't work anymore. So if anyone tries to push it, there is only a connection to the divine spirit within, instead of the hurt and pain in the festering disconnection and unforgiveness. So feel it to heal it, as they say. And thank goodness I did and do. The third question and last question that I asked myself to help me with healing and forgiveness is, do I object to this? I ask myself, do I object to alcohol and drug use? And my answer is, yes, I do. Because for me personally, I perceived that my decision to use alcohol and drugs somehow robbed me of what I also perceived could have been a different experience in life and one of a more enjoyable youth engaged in more positive activities. So hence, guilty as charged by my own mind and also imprisoned by my own mind. So if I can answer yes to any of the three questions, I can begin my healing and forgiveness. When I arrive at this point, I can go immediately into prayer and healing, forgiving myself for feeling guilty about my past and loving myself for being intelligent enough to let go and let God and be all that I am. I remember that judgment is disconnection and forgiveness and non-judgment is connection. Remember, I'm always immersed in the one intelligence. But the moment I go into judgment and unforgiveness, I create what I call a disconnection from my belief of unity and oneness. If I let my unforgiveness grow and fester, I usually find myself alone, isolated, and feeling disconnected from others. The spell is broken that I created. The skeletons are out of the closet that I hid away in shame and guilt, and I no longer judge the people who desire to excessively drink alcohol and do drugs. I simply bless them, pray for them, love them, and know that their path is one of health and happiness, peace and prosperity. I don't condemn, I don't condone or condemn, but simply love them just as they are. So that is my personal example. And if you haven't taken any of Dr. Reverend Michelle Wadleigh's classes, I highly encourage you to register because it is a real game changer. Her brand new book called Forgiveness is now available on Amazon as of October 26th. And it is a beautiful compilation of years of sharing her wisdom of forgiveness techniques. This book is a keeper on your bookshelf. I ordered mine and I'm excited about receiving it. So thank you, Dr. Reverend Michelle. So I leave you with this wonderful quote from Saint Francis of Assisi, who said, "Lord, make me an instrument of thy peace. Where there is hatred, let me sow love. Where there is injury, pardon. Where there is doubt, faith. Where there is despair, hope. Where there is darkness, light. And where there is sadness, joy. O divine Master, grant that I may not so much seek to be consoled as to console, to be understood as to understand, to be loved as to love. For it is in the giving that we receive. It is in the pardoning that we are pardoned. And it is in the dying that we are born to eternal life." Namaste, my friends.
Thank you, Dawn Lee. Now, Reverend Michelle.
Oh, good morning, and Darlene, thank you. So I'm gonna finish today. I'm gonna leave you alone about forgiveness for quite a while, especially since we made it a month-long subject. And Dawn Lee, I'm not certain about where you got that information from. I just have, so people don't try to order it. It's not quite out yet. I don't know what you ordered, but my workbook, it's still going to be like another week or so. It's just the powers, the way the tools or the wheels of progress and the way they turn. And I'm working on being extremely patient. So if you go to find it and it's not there, don't be surprised, but it will be there very soon. So what's the big deal? What is the big deal? Why am I always talking about this? And I want to tell you, it is because I am the living proof. I am absolutely the living proof of I am the walking evidence of forgiveness. I am the walking evidence of forgiveness. And I know this because even there are some individuals, a number of people that were close to me that have helped me with editing the book and looking at it in advance. And I put a long introduction in the beginning of the book, and it's my story. And almost every person who knows me personally, who read the introduction of the book, will call me up either in tears or telling me they were in tears. Now, it's just my life. And it's not even, it doesn't, if you were to compare, which we wouldn't, but it's not the worst story in the world. It's just, but it is a hard story. And I put it in the book because it is imperative that you know that I'm walking this path, that this is not an intellectual process. I have relationships that are beautiful and brilliant. Why? Because I learned to forgive my past, excuse me. I have relatively good health. I'm working on some really good self-care, but it is my forgiveness and keeping my soul, my emotions, and my spirit clear that makes up for where, maybe my health is still being worked on. Forgiveness opens the pathways within us. In the beginning of every year, Excuse me, folks, a little congested this morning. In the beginning of every year, we worked with the first 4 chapters, the thing itself, the way it works, what it does, how to use it, right? And so we know that spirit moves through us. Well, here's the thing. It will move through you in a more beautiful, dynamic, and brilliant way the more you are available to it. We become more available through the practice of forgiveness. And Wadleigh pointed that out so beautifully, that between understanding the shadow and forgiving the shadow and then clearing the way, spirit through you, through me, becomes it has clearer access. It has a clearer pathway. And so what happens is when I speak my word as a wounded individual, then my word comes out slightly corrupted. But if I speak my word as a healed and whole individual, my word comes out more directly. Can you understand that? Does that make sense? So we do this work to clear the vessel. You and I are the vessel. And how do you know if you need to forgive? And the first question, this is kind of a joke amongst teachers, are you breathing? Because I have never met an individual that didn't need to practice forgiveness and to continue to practice. Why? Because, and Wadleigh, you pointed this out so beautifully again. Because if you are in judgment of anyone or anything, that judgment needs to be healed, because that judgment impacts you. Ernest Holmes says, he says a number of beautiful things. The solution to every problem within humans is the healing of all disease within humans, the forgiveness of all sin within humans, the raising of the dead is within humans. Heaven is within us. How do we get there? By clearing the vessel. He also said, I have never known a person who completely came to forgive herself and to establish a right relationship with God, who did not at the same time forgive everyone else. Get that? I have never known a person who completely came to forgive themselves and to establish a right relationship with God, who did not at the same time forgive everyone else. Most of our criticism of others comes from an unconscious rejection of the self. That's Holmes. Most of our criticism of others comes from an unconscious rejection of the self. So today what I promised is some of the tools. So we're going to do a lot of the tools in the workshop, a number of them. The book is 150 pages long, and it's packed full with all sorts of tools and guidance. So we'll only do a few today, but the first thing I need you to get, let me see this. Yeah. There are 3 aspects that are critical. One is the forgiving of others. Now, if we are in practice, spiritual practice, we know that in truth, there are no others, not in high truth. There is no other, there is no outside. That doesn't mean that our human mind doesn't take inventory. Some of us I want to remove the spotlight for the moment. I want to see everybody. That we take inventory, we take prisoners, right? Can you admit that? Can you admit that sometimes you take prisoners? And those prisoners, here's the thing, this is what happens. Every time we take a prisoner, we are held captive. You and I are held captive. It walls off our heart. It walls off our heart. So the first thing you do is you practice by forgiving others. When you can explain it, when you can't explain it, when it makes sense, and even when it doesn't make sense, you forgive others. And we don't have to wait We don't have to wait to see the evidence of it. We just stay in the practice. And I'll talk to you about how to get there more quickly. We practice forgiveness of the self. Here's the thing. I've been teaching this course so often this past year. All this stuff, all these things, my mistakes, my transgressions, they kept coming up and coming up and coming up. I have had to be in consistent practice of self-forgiveness to free my mind, to free my heart. And then there is a part where you have to look at certain things that are decades old, and you have to be willing to say, oh my God, just forget about it. Literally, there are some things you and I have been carrying for decades. We have to let it go. Literally, just let it go completely. But the third thing is, so we forgive others because that's the outside that gets our attention. We forgive the self. And then the third part, and this is the tricky part, we learn about innocence. You have heard us talk about this 1,000 times in this community, that you are not at the mercy of anything, not now, not ever. And part of not being at the mercy means in recognizing your own innocence and where the innocence lives in another. And the beauty of that is that when you can really find your innocence, you'll begin to realize that who you are now is not the person that you were when you made the mistake. Right? Get that. Who you are now is not the person that you were when you made the error you are attempting to forgive yourself for. And so the critical thing, I'm sorry to be to repeat. I am. I love you all, and I know that I repeat myself. I do. Because the truth is, science of mind is pretty simple. It's simple. It's not complicated. As long as you're practicing. As long as you're practicing and you're staying conscious. And so the foundation of what we're talking about, and again, Dawn Lee brought it out, is the practice of non-judgment. If I don't judge you, then I don't have to forgive you. Now, some of us get very righteous and we get very attached to our righteousness. And we feel very, we wind up feeling very righteous. There's people at work you feel righteous about. There are people in your ministry that you feel righteous about. There are people in your family that you feel righteous about. You do. And you, very possibly, to an untrained ear, might be able to convince somebody else that you're right. It's possible. But what I hope in this community is that we have up-leveled our listening enough to realize that what the complaint is about, what the judgment is about, is not reality. It's not reality. So if I call up Patricia and I'm bitching and moaning about Neil, and I'm saying, no, Neil does this and Neil does that, and Neil said this and Neil said that. Now, Patricia happens to be a practitioner, but my hope is that in this community, we've learned this, is that she would listen to me, but not believe me. Listen to me so I could feel heard, but not give power to my complaint. So when you and I in community, when we learn to listen and listen from an elevated listening, we are not giving agreement to what is being said. When you and I do that, we help to free the person speaking. So if you call me and you really have an upset, Jennifer calls me and she's complaining about her husband, Michael. I know that that's about Jennifer. It's not about Michael. And so when we do that, we become freer and freer and freer. And the freer you and I are, the better we are for society, the better we are for the planet. Because we in truth are luminous bodies. And so when I clear my space and I stay in this spiritual illuminated space, and I go out and I engage the world, what happens is I leave evidence of that sweetness. I leave evidence of truth. I leave evidence every time I engage somebody. You do the same thing, whether you realize it or not. If you are a spiritually practiced metaphysician, non-judging metaphysician, you are automatically blessing everyone that you engage. I know that Reverend Joel spoke last week about the title I gave him was Our Lineage is Our Legacy. And I want to speak to that one more time. There is so much evidence in the world today. Psychology, quantum evidence that you and I are demonstrating pain from our family. This is not, and it started to be spoken about a lot more as we did our anti-racism work. So yes, it's true with the racism work, but it's not just there. I have spent decades challenging my own mind and trying to figure out what is it that I have about my prosperity. Why do I struggle and why do I have to constantly remind myself that I'm worthy? And what happens is in my own life, I could see in my own life, my mother and my father, they were kind of frugal, and my mother was a coupon clipper, and she would walk an extra 2 blocks to go to a store if she could save 5 cents on a can of tuna fish, right? So that was that. But I have to look at what caused that. What caused that is that they survived the Depression. They knew what not enough was. And so these feelings, these things get handed down while you are in your mother's womb. Even if there wasn't conversation about it, we have adopted behavior and beliefs that have been handed down to us through DNA. So I beg you to do the work. Why? Because then you are the change agent for everyone down below you, for your nieces, for your nephews, for your children, for your grandchildren. That being more plugged in, more on fire for principle, more on fire for life and the beauty of forgiveness and the effect that it has, that your legacy becomes stunning. It becomes stunning. I watch myself with my grandchildren, and I know we have a lot of very proud and involved grandparents on this call, and to the point where did Richard coming? Oh, he's still here. Richard, I know that if you watch Richard on Facebook, one of his greatest pleasures now are his precious little granddaughters. Well, it's more than he loves them. It's more than I love my grandchildren. It's more than Jessa loving her grandchildren and everyone else. We teach through our behavior. We teach through our engagement. We teach in our language. We teach by acceptance. We teach every time we enter a room, every time we enter a relationship, every time we show up as whole. And that wholeness, a lot of that wholeness is dependent upon your willingness to forgive yourself and forgive others. So much love, Richard is saying. So we close out this month, and I hope many of you Neil, if you want to put the link in again, that you join us for a about 90-minute workshop, just to go through some of the practices. We have a document that we'll send you that you can take home, print out. Matter of fact, you'll want to print it out. You'll want to print it out for use during the workshop. So in the few minutes of the break, you'll have an opportunity to do that. But the world needs you and I to be whole. It needs you and I to be whole. We can't play small. We can't play small, not now, not ever again. So join me as I treat and anchor this in prayer. Oh, the very power, the presence, the love, the essence of good, the vibration of sweetness in the air that is the evidence of God, life, spirit by any name. It is here. It is here completely. It is stunning. It is beautiful. I'm open to it. I align with it. And I speak this word from that place. I declare for everyone here and everyone listening in the future that the goodness, the grace, the beauty of life, it's seeking us. It is seeking us to be a vessel through which it can demonstrate beauty and love and compassion and wholeness. It wants you and I to live in the yes, to live in the I am worthy, to live in the being available to the movement of good and love. Let us accept the invitation. Let us rise up and accept this invitation for this beauty and so much more. I am truly grateful. And I surrender this word and I allow it to be so. And so it is.